The mainstream media is furious after two landslide election victories in Europe on Sunday. News outlets like CNN and CNBC are attacking Hungary's leader Viktor Orban for criticizing Zelensky and George Soros in his re-election victory speech. CNBC with the headline, Hungary's nationalist leader Orban criticizes Ukraine's Zelensky in election victory speech. They say Orban and his right-wing party won a comfortable majority over the opposition, United for Hungary Alliance, on Sunday, despite expectations for a tight race. In a 10-minute speech to his supporters following the election, he claimed victory and then denounced what he described as an overwhelming force that had been against him and his campaign, which included Zelensky. Quote, "The left at home, the international left all around, the Brussels bureaucrats, the George Soros empire with all its money, the international mainstream media, and in the end, even the Ukrainian president," he said, according to a translation by the Associated Press. There's an article from Zero Hedge with the headline, Pollsters Humiliated as Two Pro-Putin Parties Win Avalanche Victories in European Elections. They open saying in a 1-2 knockout punch for pro-Russia governments in Europe, on Sunday the government of Serbia's pro-Russia president Alexander Vučić was headed for an avalanche victory in the country's presidential election with nearly 60% of the vote, a big improvement to his 2017 election result. Meanwhile, Hungary's pro-Russia Prime Minister Viktor Orban was on track to clinch a fourth consecutive term, leveraging a message against being dragged into the conflict in Ukraine. Opinion polls forecasted a tight race. However, Orban's party won comfortably across much of the country. They add another quote from Orban's speech on Sunday. He said, "We have such a victory, it can be seen from the moon, but it's sure that it can be seen from Brussels." Here he's making light of his government's long-running tensions with EU leaders. "We will remember this victory until the end of our lives because we had to fight against a huge amount of opponents," Orban said. Once again, they also note how Orban's unexpectedly strong victory defied polls ahead of the vote that had predicted Orban would face the toughest challenge to re-election in his 12 years in power. That was the narrative that was pushed by the mainstream media, including the anti-Orban Bloomberg News. In this article from Zero Hedge, they add that it almost makes one wonder why anyone, besides liberals of course, still uses polling, which obviously can't forecast the future, and also fails at mere propaganda in influencing election turnouts. They continue saying, until recently, a new term would have been a defining moment for the 58-year-old Orban, who over the past decade consolidated power and challenged the EU's so-called democratic foundations, raising questions about Hungary's allegiance to so-called Western values. It's another example of this type of disapproval from the mainstream media. Zero Hedge includes a quote from Bloomberg, adding, "After forging closer ties with Russian President Vladimir Putin while needling his EU counterparts over everything from controlling courts to LGBTQ rights, Orban risks deeper isolation as Europe confronts Moscow." In response to that quote from Bloomberg, Zero Hedge says, "Perhaps so, but the people have spoken, and the people clearly want a person in charge who forges closer ties with Putin while needling EU counterparts. Or maybe it's time for the deep state, Biden, to suggest some more regime change, this time in Hungary." Throughout the conflict in Ukraine, Orban refused to fold to Western pressure and offered limited support for Ukraine, refusing to let weapons shipments cross Hungary and rejecting a ban on Russian oil and gas imports. His message was that joining a rush by fellow EU and NATO members to aid Ukraine would drag Hungary into the conflict. That resonated with voters against an opposition campaign that suggested that Orban was Putin's pawn and the ballot is a choice between East and West. In the end, being close to Putin served as a powerful force behind Orban's avalanche victory. Finally, they add that Orban could face some daunting political challenges during this term, while the cost of financing Hungarian debt has soared as the central bank hiked interest rates to the highest in the EU. Hungary's access to billions of euros in crucial EU funding has been delayed due to concerns over corruption in Hungary. This article points out is a standard trick in Brussels, which ruthlessly and anti-democratically determines who can and cannot rule in Europe by limiting access to funds. Meanwhile, Orban's political narrative, centering on the decline of the West and the rise of authoritarian regimes, remains his strong suit. He will also need to navigate a new EU mechanism that links funding to adherence to the rule of law. It was approved in 2020 after the Hungarian premier outmaneuvered the bloc's concerns about the rollback of democratic norms for the better part of the decade. Should it be activated this year, they say it threatens to deprive Hungary of as much as $40 billion. Of course, should it be activated, they also add that many peripheral states may simply decide to seek a better fate in the orbit of other nations, such as China or Russia, which would be a catastrophic blow to the future of the EU. As for the election in Serbia on Sunday, after declaring victory on Sunday evening, Alexander Vučić said the new government would face tough challenges but would seek to maintain friendly relations with Russia, a historically close ally. They note that most of the parties running in the election were right-leaning, reflecting the predominantly conservative sentiments among Serbia's 6.5 million voters. Zelensky on Saturday said that Hungary's leader, Viktor Orban, had been out of touch with the rest of the EU. He called him, quote, virtually the only one in Europe to openly support Mr. Putin. Please leave a comment and tell me what you think about this latest update. If you could give this video a thumbs up, remember to click the like button, that's greatly appreciated, and make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. As usual, thank you very much everyone who has been supporting this channel with your donations over at Patreon or PayPal, and with your super chats as well. That's greatly appreciated. Even just a few dollars makes a huge difference and helps me keep talking about these important issues. You can find either link down in the video description where you can support this channel directly, patreon.com/realityreader or paypal.me/realityreader. And once again, with all the censorship happening here at YouTube, I'll remind everyone it's probably a good idea to find me on some alternative platforms as well. The best place where you can find me is superu.net. That's super, the letter u.net. You can also find me at odyssey.com. I will follow up soon. Thanks again.